Good evening, brothers and sisters, friends, and people that haven't yet become our friends, but we hope we will. I hope that you can see the screen with David DeBarthe on it. A thumbs up.
No, Paul, we can't. We've got your backgrounds.
We'll go back and try that again then. Okay, we share a screen.
There you go.
All right. And we want to go back to slideshow. It is a pleasure for me to be able to welcome you back and to greet all of you that I've already got signed in on my sheet of paper. Most of you are reoccurring participants and some presenters, and are like extended family for me. And I really appreciate that we've been able to share together and be enriched by the sharing over the last year and a half. The special session this evening is one that I've been looking forward to for some time. Many of you are aware that my brother accuses me of being the one who will swat every wasp nest as I see, particularly if he happens to be following me. And I think there is a certain amount of truth to what he says. And I think you're going to see a bit of that tonight, because I read the Ralph Olsen materials and was intrigued by the Malay Peninsula theory, and swatted that wasp nest, and he walked into it and got stung. And so here he's going to be sharing it with you. Let me introduce David DeBarthe. He is a native of Lamoni, Iowa, graduate of Graceland College, has a master's degree in earth science from Indiana University. He's the seventh generation of teachers in our family since Mary Lyon established the first school for women in Mount Holyoke back in 1840. He's a pioneer in computer education. He retired from 37 years directing the Graceland Computing Services to volunteer for the I Dig Nauvoo project as an assistant to the lead archaeologist, the one who swats the wasp nests and then has a tendency to run. The wasp nest of Book of Mormon geography brings us to the Malay hypothesis. And so I'm going to invite you this evening to watch out for the stingers. David and Jan live in Lamoni under solar panels that supply electricity for their car. He advocates for Zionic community, scriptural integrity, and the quest for truth. It is my pleasure to introduce my brother, the oldest of the DeBarthes, a close friend of the Christ, and a good wasp swatter, a measurer of Nauvoo. If I had that right, we should go to the prayer. For some reason, why has it not moved? Okay,
There it is.
let's pray. Loving creator of the magnificent spheres of existence, we bow in appreciation of your patience with us, your grace, and your persistence. For in the glimpse we have of all you have created, all forms of life, the beauty of reality, we can but appreciate that somehow you see fit to recognize us and to hear our individual plea. This evening, our plea is for your spirit to rest upon us, and especially our speaker, David DeBarthe, who comes to us from a family dedicated to establishing a Zionic hearth, who will offer a perspective intended to challenge our thinking, our traditional views, and will encourage us to look beyond geography to embrace the essential message of the scripture, the good news. News that the word of God is stronger than the dividing sword, bending history toward fulfilling promises encapsulated in the holy word. Our plea as well is for our brothers and sisters in Russia and Ukraine and others in our world facing the horrors of war, that your spirit rest upon the perpetrators, penetrate their hearts, their spirits to the core. Bless them, their victims, all the fearful children, hoping the war will cease, with the recognition that we all are better when we follow the guidance of the Prince of Peace. And as we add our prayerful support to those targeted, those offering peaceful resistance, we pray as well for guidance that our choices can move the world toward Zionic coexistence. In the name of the Prince of Peace, Jesus the Christ, amen. Big brother, the screen share is open to you, and let us hear about the Malay Peninsula theory.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Now we have my first slide.
Yes,
Malay hypothesis,
yes.
Ralph Olsen, PhD. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, Paul. Paul didn't mention there's about 10 years difference in our ages. Paul was the ornery little brat at times, swat a wasp nest and run just as I was coming around the corner. But it became Big Brother's job to take care of the wasp nest so that other people didn't get stung. And so there's a little bit of that here where he's asking me to take care of a wasp nest. It proved to be a far more enjoyable task than I ever dreamed it would be. So I hope you will enjoy with me the Malay hypothesis as proposed by Dr. Ralph Olsen.
Can you hold
And
it
I've
still?
got pictures in my way. How do I get the see, let's try muting that. That'll get most of them out of there. Okay. I have the gallery over part of my screen. I couldn't read it. Since this is being recorded, let me say right up front that I strongly believe in continuing revelation. Therefore, anything said here may not be the same I would declare at some time in the future. I went looking for Dr. Olsen's book and found A More Promising Land of Promise for the Book of Mormon. This was on the, was it Amazon, $24.95. So the book, at least when I checked a few months ago, was on sale. Here's what it said about the book. Dr. Olsen has been researching for 25 plus years. He wants to prove the authenticity of the Book of Mormon. His book contains evidence supporting a new site for the Book of Mormon events. It provides a narrow peninsula extending north and south. Not only do the geography and terrain match, the voyages would have been easier, and the animals and plants are indigenous. Many sites in reasonable locations and with reasonable names match those of the Book of Mormon. Inscribed metal plates held together with rings have been found nearby. Hebrew lettering has been found as have references to the Bible. Languages and beliefs have Mideast connotations. It even accommodates DNA evidence. On modern maps, there exists a hill Ma. In the Book of Mormon, it's Hill Ramah, where most of the inscribed gold plates of Mormon were hidden. These plates could be the most important archaeological find in the history of mankind.
Is that somebody outside?
Jan, you're interrupting,
I
please.
heard the door.
Please, Jan. Dr. Ralph Austin Olsen passed away at the Ashley Regional Medical Center, April 22nd, 2014. Ralph was born on January 30th, 1925 in Moroni, Utah, to Ethel Oman and John Olsen. Ralph was a lifetime member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. World War II veteran, Austria in 1943 to 46. Bachelor of Science, Brigham Young University, 1949. MS, Cornell University, 1951. PhD, Cornell University, 1953. Sigma Chi member, soil scientist, U.S. Department of Agriculture in Beltsville, Maryland, 1953 to 1956. postdoctoral fellow, Mineral Nutrition Pioneering Research Lab in Bellsville, 1961 to 62. Institute of Biological Chemistry, University of Copenhagen, Denmark, 1965-1966. Faculty member, Chemistry Department, Montana State University, Bozeman, 1956 to 1987. Member of the American Chemistry Society and Soil Science Society of America. So that's the introduction to Dr. Olsen. Sorry he couldn't be here to introduce him, to be introduced personally. I went looking and found Dr. Olsen wrote an article in Sunstone magazine. And the Sunstone magazine article was very nicely online, and it's Dr. Olsen's summary of his book. And so I admit to cheating a little bit by using his summary in the Sunstone article. I was able to do very easy cutting and pasting from the Sunstone article into my PowerPoint. And so the words that we have here from Dr. Olsen are all from his Sunstone article, with the exception of picture of Olsen, which you saw here, and his Malay maps, which I'll show you later. All the other pictures are pictures I have gleaned to try to support his hypothesis. And then I've added a number of comments along the way, and you'll find, hopefully I've labeled those well enough you can tell which comments are mine and which comments are Dr. Olsen's. His introduction to the article: in presenting what I label the Malay hypothesis, I realize I'm suggesting that studies aimed at locating the Book of Mormon lands and accurately identifying descendants of the Book of Mormon peoples would need to undergo a radical paradigm shift, one that many would consider quite far-fetched. I am fully aware that no church leader, Joseph Smith included, has pointed toward Southeast Asian setting, but neither have they made statements which rule it out. Dr. Olsen's closing statement, and you'll see that again later, the Malay hypothesis proposes that there are many cherished lands of promise or Zions throughout the world, not just one. We start talking about the journey. If we grant that the Lord was directing the Jaredites, having them travel west from Nimrod via the Mediterranean Sea would have been far shorter and more sensible route if the land of promise was to be somewhere in the Americas. It would have been even more sensible for the Nephites originating near the sea in Jerusalem. So he's suggesting if the Lord really wanted them in America, he'd had them go across the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic, a much shorter route than any other route they could take. The Book of Mormon makes no reference to sickness, fatalities, drownings, shipwrecks, food, feed, and water shortages, nor to serious mutinies or despair. Perhaps relatively short voyages on one of the Earth's calmer oceans are indicated. So I went looking very quickly for the currents of the Indian Ocean and found this map. Here you see Arabian Peninsula, Pakistan and India, and the southwest monsoon current coming along the coast all the way to here is the Malaysian Peninsula,
Sri Lanka.
the land of Malay that he is suggesting is a possible landing site for the Book of Mormon people. So he's suggesting this route to Malay rather than some complex long route across the Pacific to America or even around Africa to America. Here's his map of Malay Peninsula showing his sites. Unlike the Bible, Book of Mormon cities and current locations have not been readily matched up. Dr. Olsen here has matched up some 22 Book of Mormon sites with current locations. And I'll show you a blow up of this so you can see. I doubt if you can read what's there.
Location.
So here's the southern part of the Malay Peninsula showing Dr. Olsen's mapping. And you can see here at the bottom, Lamanite lands down here, land of Nephi here, and on up numerous other cities, locations that he has identified as being corresponding to Book of Mormon sites. One of particular interest, Tanamera Zarahemla, right here on the west side of a north flowing river. And he'll mention that in his comments, but he places a Zarahemla on the west side of a north flowing river. I want to mention here the Hermouts Mountain Wilderness west and north of Zarahemla, showing here. I'm doing that so when you see the next map, you can see where they overlap. Here's his comments. Sidon River, a major river, Sidon, runs north to the sea past Zarahemla to the west. The Keelantan River matches the accounts, and he quotes Alma. All of his scriptures, of course, are the Utah Book of Mormon, and I did not go through and try to find corresponding RLDS scriptures. If you get the recording, you can do that. So here again, Zarahemla on the north flowing Keelantan River, which you would say is probably the Sidon River. A narrow strip of mountain wilderness. A narrow strip of wilderness extends east-west across the midsection of the land southward. The Cameron highlines of the Malay match the account. And here I'm assuming that these are the Cameron highlands. Inhabitable terrain. Well-inhabited hilly terrain was located along 200 miles or more of the northeastern seashore in the land southward. Alma, in their book, 50 to 62. Malay matches very well, whereas some proposed sites in America have no lands along a northeastern seashore portion of the land southward at all. So we're going back here. Here's the scale of miles down here. I'm assuming you can see my pointer. Somebody say yes or no.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So here you can see the scale of miles down here at the bottom. So 200 miles along the northeastern shore as inhabitable land, which the Malay Peninsula then matches exactly what the Book of Alma is stating. Here's the north portion, and down here again, the Hermouts Mountains west, wilderness west and north of Zarahemla that I told you be matching up. And here's the northern portion. Key point he makes, 1.5 days across the narrow pass. 1.5 days across the narrow pass. Let's see, that one's hidden from me by my share screen. The plains of Agash, anyway, up here, ether. Key, I think, is the desolation, land of many rivers and waters. You think, well, this can't be the land of desolation, it's just all islands, but realize that islands would be not always islands if the sea was lowered or raised. And considering then the catastrophic occasions when Christ was crucified, you can see this could very well be the land of desolation, and it matches some other things he talks about later on. Geography, width and length. A Nephite could cross the northern end of the narrow neck in 1.5 days.
Would you hold still, please?
In going from Zarahemla on the northward through the narrow neck of land, Nephites traveling an exceeding great distance. So from Zarahemla to the land northward is an exceeding great distance. Malay provides the requisite geography. And so you can see Zarahemla was down here. So we are talking several hundred miles. Inlet. Malay has an inlet on the West Sea by a narrow neck of land, which would account nicely for a reference to a place near the narrow neck where the sea divides the land from the Book of Ether. And so here you see what he's identified as that inlet, which cuts through the narrow neck of land where the sea ends up dividing the land. And the land southward was nearly surrounded by water with a small neck of land extending northward. This matches Malay, as you've already seen in the other maps, and here I have a different map showing the same thing. Peninsula and orientation, Malay is nearly surrounded by water from Alma, and you can see the Malay Peninsula is nearly surrounded by water. as Alma says the land in the Book of Mormon is. Seas to the east and west predominate in Malay, but not in many of the favored Mesoamerican proposals. So here, if you're reading the Book of Mormon and read about the East Sea and the West Sea, there's no question. You got an East Sea and a West Sea. Boundaries in Malay, and I can't read what that is. The land southward would be the present day Malaysia. The land bountiful would be Thailand, and the land northward would be Myanmar, or it used to be Burma. Could these ancient boundaries be retained? So here's Malaysia, which he's saying is the land southward, the boundary with Indonesia. Here's the land bountiful, which is Indonesia, and here's the land northward, which is Myanmar. The land bountiful. In the Malay setting, the land bountiful can correctly occupy the entire narrow neck of land and extend from sea to sea. Okay, that's the geography that he points to. Then he goes to talk about culture. Excuse me. The Malay Peninsula has much of its cultural history that aligns with the Book of Mormon peoples and events, including Jewish affinities. Hugh Nibley has noted that the Karen of Burma have displayed such astonishing cultural affinities with the Jews that some observers have even claimed them to be of Jewish origin. There are also striking resemblances between the Karen beliefs and those of the Book of Mormon. And then he puts this reference in his book, or in his footnotes, to reference 18, which I decided to copy. Hugh Nibley, in his book, Lehi in the Desert and the World of the Jaredites, 1980, page 121, Karen historical events match those of the Book of Mormon peoples to an amazing extent. The Karens, and he's parenthetically Lamanites, lost their copy of Yahweh's book. The White brothers, Nephites, carefully preserved their copy. As a result, white people became righteous and are known as guides to God. They sailed away in ships with white wings, but will return with Yahweh's white book. Some traditions say that the book would be gold or silver. And then he mentions another book. And so I want to point out again, Yahweh's book could have been gold plates. And it's the righteous book taken care of by the white brothers who were known as the guides to God. That's the Karen tradition. Then I've added this insertion. I went to Wikipedia to look up more about the Karens. It's estimated by linguists Luce and Lehman that the Tibeto-Burman people, such as the Karen, migrated into present-day Burma between 300 and 800 the current era. Now, let me point out for those of you who have just read from the Book of Mormon and those who have read earlier, 300 years after Christ would put it right at the time the Troubles began. So 300 to 800 years, the Karens migrated into Burma. So I asked the question, are the Karens Lamanites out of the Malay Peninsula, or another Israelite migration to their holy land, Zion, Jesus's other sheep? They are certainly persecuted by the Gentiles. And so I went looking for examples of that persecution and found this in the Wheat and Tares org webpage. And I pulled this quote out. The Karen, like I said, they're an ethnic minority in Burma, and they've had a lot of military conflicts with the Burmese government. They've set up their own militia. In their history, and this is the early 90s, there was this one confrontation where they had a stronghold around this Oxbow Lake thing on a river on the border of Thailand. They named that stronghold Camorra. Camorra, I kid you not. Camorra.
Camorra.
Scripts and languages. Nibley, again, I'm underneath the I'm underneath the stop share, so I can't read what's there. Nibley also reports writing in the India-Burma region, directly north of the Malays Peninsula, quote, was actually derived from Aramaic and Phoenician forms ultimately taken from the Egyptian, end quote. And so I make the note here that we need Brian Stubbs type analysis on the Malay area languages to verify, show the evidence for that. So then I pulled a map of the Karen territory in Myanmar. And you can see here it is. Well, here's the Malay Peninsula with the narrow neck and the Karen territory then going up through along Myanmar and Indonesia. Dr. Olsen then mentions mining, metallurgy, tools and weapons. 1979 study of Thai metallurgy, Dr. T.T. Bayard reports that bronze may have been in use as early as 3000 BC. The introduction of iron tools has been dated at 1340 BC. These dates match the chronology and activities of the Jaredites, Nether, and the Nephites. So I went looking to see, I Googled to see if there were archaeological sites in Malay that could match Book of Mormon dates, and here's what I found. The ancient iron smelting in SG Batu, Bayong Valley, Kedah. And so here is the iron smelting site. Notice that's not iron mining, that's iron smelting site here on this river, or on this bay, if you will, on the west side of the Malay Peninsula. Here's where you can see that there. And this site was dated 3rd to 5th century Common Era. Note again, 3rd century, right at the end of the very prosperous Book of Mormon era. And then the troubles following that, but iron smelting. I found this page. I can't read what that is, so I'll have to start down here. Secondary school teacher and history buff Fame told Benar News, evidence unearthed at these sites proved that our ancestors had a strong civilization to the extent that the Sungai Batu was a thriving industrial port. I didn't underline it here, but I'm underlining it now. Thriving industrial port exporting high-grade iron products to other civilizations during that time, he said. He hoped that state and federal governments would start the ball rolling so that our future generations would get a clearer history of our ancestors' achievements in building a civilization some 2,000 years ago. So I simply point out, well, we've done no LIDAR type analysis as far as I know in that area. An awful lot of archaeology yet to be done or could be done, but this history buff is saying they had civilizations 2,000 years ago. And here's the map showing where the Kedar region is, and here's where the mine would be, showing where it is in Malaysian Peninsula. Culture, still culture, inscribed metal plates. The Karen tribe, mentioned above, made metal plates, not only of copper, but of gold. In nearby India, copper plates, inscribed, perforated, and linked together with metal rings have been found. Then he talks about the animals for food. Book of Mormon peoples are described as having domesticated, underlined domesticated, cattle, oxen, cows, sheep, goats, swine, and other animals, quoting ether from there. All of these animals are indigenous to the old world, speaking of the Malaysian area. None in America. Evidence for pigs, dogs, fowls, goats, and cattle during the Book of Mormon times have been found in Southeast Asia. Well, I put a side comment that I didn't get in here, but we're just reading or noting not too far back. Remember when Ammon went to Lamoni and became Lamoni's servant, in effect, and he was guiding Lamoni's herds by the water. And we've often wondered, what were they herds of?
Cattle.
Well, That's a problem in America, but not in the Malaysian Peninsula. Animals for work. Book of Mormon people are described as having horses, asses, and more useful elephants and curlums and kumums. Again, from Ether. Horses and asses and elephants are indigenous to the Orient. And we have, those of us who've supported the Book of Mormon have long battled with the scientists about horses in America and have not been able to prove one way or the other particularly, but if you put the Book of Mormon people in the Malaysian Peninsula, both are true. There were no horses at that time in America, and there were in the Book of Mormon people. Malay also has water buffalo and other bovines. Could these be curlums and kumums, which are more useful than horses and asses in the Southeast Asian climate and for indigenous forms of agriculture? So a quick picture. Here's a water buffalo being very useful in the tillage in that climate. Now, we checked Wikipedia. There are two types of water buffalo recognized based on morphological and behavioral criteria: the river buffalo and the swamp buffalo. And again, went looking for pictures and found these two pictures of the buffalo. Now, I'm not going to guarantee you by any means that one of these is a swamp buffalo and one's a river buffalo. I just found these two pictures of water buffalo that were very different. And so I'm showing there is a difference there. I could even be persuaded without a lot of persuasion that the curlums and kumums were actually terms for male and female of something like a water buffalo. And Malaysian elephants, here shows working Malaysian elephants. There is absolutely no record that I know of whatsoever to show that the American people at any point domesticated elephants, or they would have had to have been mammoths. There's no sign of domestication of those animals in America, but here the working Malaysian elephants date all the way back. Grains. Middle Eastern grains include wheat, oats, barley, rye, millet, and possibly rice. Please note that's Middle Eastern grains, where they would have brought grain with them. Successful production requires tillage operations using farming implements and work animals. Wheat, barley, and other cereal grains have long been cultivated in Southeast Asia. There is no evidence of their cultivation in Mesoamerica. Fruits. Middle Eastern fruits include apple, pear, plum, cherry, apricot, peach, fig, persimmon, melon, quince, pomegranate, banana, orange, lemon, lime, and date. An early naturalist in southern Burma found pineapple, grape, banana, coconut, breadfruit, plum, apple, orange, lime, citron, and many other fruits under cultivation. Silk. The Book of Mormon describes an abundance of silk, and that's from both Alma, which have been the Nephite people, and Ether, which have been the Jaredite people. Both of them describe an abundance of silk. But the silk arts were developed in neighboring to Malaysia, China in 2600 BC. As a way to reconcile Book of Mormon terms with other settings, some have suggested that the terms may not have been translated correctly. Maybe silk doesn't really mean silk. However, I, and this is Dr. Olsen, prefer that terms be interpreted literally if possible. The introduction to the Book of Mormon quotes Joseph Smith as saying that the Book of Mormon is the most correct book on earth and the keystone of our religion. I, Dr. Olsen, believe that we should not simply reinterpret or assign vague meanings to those parts of the book that do not fit our preconceived notions. And then I added this one from my own inverse, third book of Nephi, and then I did the Utah numbering for that one. And thus 6 years had not passed away since the more part of the people had turned from their righteousness like a dog to its vomit, or like the sow to her wallowing in the mire. USDA webpage, feral swine were not native to Americas. They were first brought to the United States in the 1500s. by early explorers and settlers as a source of food. Nephi, or probably Mormon, who was most likely doing the writing at this point, would not know about swine. So is this a Joseph Smith insertion translation? The Malay hypothesis solved that dilemma. If both the Book of Nephi and Joseph Smith are accurate, it must not have been in the Americas. Volcanic explosions. The Book of Mormon reports that at the time of Christ's crucifixion, devastating events took place in the land of promise. The events were so catastrophic, I believe they can best be explained by an explosive volcanic event, not simply an extrusion of lava. The Malay Peninsula provides a good setting. For example, Krakatoa, 1883, and Tambora, 1815 explosions, both in Indonesia, just south of the proposed Malay site, caused huge quantities of material to be blown into the atmosphere, leaving calderas. There were tempests and thunderous noise and frightful earthquakes and lightnings and fires and tsunamis, all of which killed tens of thousands of people. That's in the 1800s. The accompanying darkness lasted for several days and affected the entire world with low temperatures, hurting crop yields. The days of darkness were to be a sign of the crucifixion to those in the isles of the sea. And he quotes Nephi on that one. With many isles nearby, the Malay Peninsula provides a good setting for the events. So I went looking for a map again. Here's a map of the earthquakes from 1900 to 2015. That's 115 years. Here's the earthquakes. White circles are earthquakes. The larger the circle, the larger the earthquake. Smaller, the size of the circle is related to the size of the earthquake. And you see the earthquakes here, not in the Malaysian Peninsula, but close next door. And then I went looking for volcanoes. Volcanoes near Malay. Here is what I think is Krakatoa as I looked on the maps. And here's in Tambora is over here. So they're south of Malay. But we do have volcanoes up along the coast, up along the Malaysian Peninsula. And I make the note, we need Jerry Garver type analysis to show, prove or disprove that those volcanoes could have had the effect that we're looking for at the time of Joseph Smith's crucifixion.
That's a lot of them.
Another one of my quotes, Mosiah 7:31, and again he saith, if my people shall sow filthiness, they shall reap the east wind, which bringeth immediate destruction. Well, as an earth scientist, the east wind, you're almost having to be talking fairly close to the equator. So I again went looking for a map. And I found global tropical cyclone tracks 1985 to 2005. So this is 20 years worth of cyclones in the Southeast Asia section. And here's the Malaysian Peninsula. Notice that it's a very rare east wind, a very rare cyclone that gets by, just like the hurricanes in our area, they usually turn north before they go too far along the equator. They come along the equator and then generally turn north. Well, occasionally one will keep going east or going west. And so you get in Malaysian Peninsula, you get occasionally a vicious east wind. And because it's coming across water all the way, they would be storms of extreme intensity. So east winds, which bring immediate destruction, will fit in the Malay Peninsula. They will not on some other sites that have been quoted for the Book of Mormon. I made a comment about climate. Dr. Olsen says nothing about climate in his book, at least not in his article. In the Book of Alma, the author, again, probably Mormon, documents about 5 years of continuous warfare. Remember Helaman's 2,000 young sons? Those 5 years of continuous warfare. We can assume it occurs in a tropical climate. Otherwise, you can't do continuous warfare. Malay between the 1 degree north and the 15 degree north is tropical enough to allow for continuous warfare. Place names. Again, Dr. Olsen, one might reasonably expect an array of place names in the Book of Mormon that exist in the land of promise. The proposed Malay setting is intriguing for this reason. Owing to dissension and incessant warfare, groups of people from the peninsula are thought to have hived off, and it's natural that they would not travel farther than necessary. On or within reasonable distances from the peninsula, the 22 place names listed on the map, and I showed you that map earlier, can be found on modern day maps. So there is a mapping between 22 place names he identifies and modern day maps. Not only are the names comparable to Book of Mormon names, the locations match Book of Mormon accounts. Then he gives an example. For example, Ether, we read that in the final battles, the Jaredites fought near Moron or Manaron, and then went eastward. Eastward to a seashore through a range of hills and fought near a hill Hill Maw. Now, Moron is the Book of Mormon name and Ramah is the Book of Mormon name. The others are the current names, but Moron becoming Manaron and Ramah becoming Maw. He's saying those are close enough that linguists say, yeah, they are related. The priceless plates of Mormon, the records which have been entrusted to him by the hand of the Lord, may still be there. And that's Olsen's speculation. And so here is my pointer. Here is the city of Manaron or Moron. You go eastward from the city. Come on, pointer, you went away. Where are you? There you go. Eastward from the city through a range of hills to the hill Maw or Ramah, where they fought their final battles. I didn't mean to switch there. Where am I? Okay. So you see, Dr. Olsen is saying, here are two places that match exactly Book of Mormon stories. And there are many others, but in his article, he points out those two. Another possibility, Madagascar, I'll show you where that is in a minute, is settled by people from Malay between 300 and 500 AD. Note again those dates. The end of the Golden Era and the beginning of the Trouble. During that time, this was about the time that Moroni and possibly other survivors were fleeing for their lives from the victorious Lamanites. Could it be possible that this is the reason that a city of Moroni is found on an island off the shore of Madagascar? So I went looking, first of all, does it make sense for people from Malay to settle Madagascar? And you look at the currents again, here's Madagascar over here. So is it possible for people from Malay to sail to Madagascar? Yeah, no big deal. And here is Madagascar with the Comoros Islands just north of it. Here's an expansion, a blow up of the Comoros Islands with
Comoros.
the Moroni, which is the capital city and the largest city in the islands, the city of Moroni in the Comoros Islands. So Dr. Olsen is suggesting that Moroni fled the the Book of Mormon lands and landed in Comoros. And then I make a comment. Boyd Tuttle showed us the southwest monsoon could take a ship south of to the Horn of Africa, and from there the currents would take you to the Americas. Go back. That monsoon current flows south during the summer months, would flow down like this to the Horn, and lost it. I lost my, I went the wrong direction. Sorry. There, Boyd Tuttle. Boyd Tuttle showed us, back up one. In fact, I think he was involved, as I remember his story, as he told us, he was involved in a ship that was built that took the float here around the Horn, and they were going to go up the west coast of Africa, but the currents took them way out. If they let it just go where it would have gone, they would have ended up in the Americas. So that's a strong possibility. So if Moroni sailed from Malay to Madagascar, Comoros, he could then sail around the Horn across the Atlantic with artifacts to Comora. And some people would make a point that Comoros and Comora are the same base names.
Are the same what?
Base names.
Base mini?
Then Dr. Olsen talks about Polynesian origins. Church leaders have indicated that among Polynesian ancestors were people from Hagoth, which you may remember from your Book of Mormon
Hagoth.
reading, who sailed from Nephite lands about 54 BC. Migrations westward into the islands of the Pacific are obviously proposed in the various American setting hypotheses. Russell T. Clement, a special collections librarian at BYU, Hawaii, writes, in few cases is the Mormon Church at such odds with the learning of men as in its answers to the intriguing questions of Polynesian origins and migrations. Clement then quotes from a statement representative of the widespread scholarly consensus on the subject. What seems beyond question is that wherever Pacific peoples might have come from in the first place, they reached the Pacific by way of Asia.
Clement.
Olsen then shares two items, which from his very long Polynesian section in his book, which be interesting to read, which I haven't yet, support the Malay hypothesis. Hawaiians claim that they came from a great and huge land, compared with their islands, joined by an isthmus. The east and west sides were washed by oceans. Coupled with the scholarly consensus that their ancestral home was Asia, the Malay Peninsula is a nice fit. Easter Island, off the coast of South America, is said to have been settled about 600 AD by Polynesians who migrated from the west. The people were called long ears by some for their custom of piercing their earlobes and using weights to induce them to grow to shoulder length. Malaysians practiced the same custom. So I went looking for pictures. And here on the left is a picture of an Easter Island native showing his long ears. And here on the right, I found a picture of a Malay island or Malay land native showing his long ears. And so you can see, well, I'm bold enough to suggest those guys look enough like to be cousins to me.
Look old enough to be what?
Cousins. Olsen then, also of interest is the legend that the first king on Easter Island brought 7 tribes with him. The Nephites recognized 7 subdivisions, quoting from Jacob. On Easter Island, 7 huge stone structures were erected in honor of the 7 tribes. These statues stare out beyond the island across the ocean to the west, remembering where they came from. And again, looking for pictures, I found this picture of the Eastern Island statues. Just happens that there's 7 of them staring in the same direction. Dr. Olsen's closing comments. To the best of my knowledge, all Book of Mormon accounts can be reasonably accommodated by the Malay hypothesis. This hypothesis seems to me to work much better with statements that people from Babel, House of Israel, and even the Lehites themselves should be, quote, scattered upon all the face of the earth, end quote, quoting from Nephi and from Ether. The Malay hypothesis proposes that there are many cherished lands of promise or Zions throughout the world, not just one. As an old chemist meddling in hallowed ground, I have undoubtedly made mistakes, but I've done my best, and I hope and pray that others will help in determining its validity. If true, the potential spiritual benefits to my brothers and sisters now and in the century and eternities to come are immense. And I want to add to the benefit there, if the Book of Mormon can be located exactly with cities and saying, here's the history that matches up, that eliminates one of the huge faults found against the Book of Mormon. And then I add, I hope and pray my error-prone summary of Dr. Olsen's work will encourage others to help in determining its validity. Then I want to comment again on Hill Cumorah and the Comoros. When I first became aware of the Malay hypothesis, I gave it almost no consideration because of what I considered to be the Cumorah dilemma. Mormon and Moroni in Malay and Joseph Smith in New York, no way. Dr. Olsen says nothing about Hill Cumorah as such. He does suggest plates hidden in Hill Mall. He, however, proposes Moroni with others traveled as far as Madagascar. I now see that Moroni could have sailed with artifacts. Take Yahweh's white gold books. In other words, Moroni could have sailed with gold plates to America and then to Cumorah. However, if you accept the artifacts under the control of an angel with Lehi's brass ball compass, you can allow anything you desire. I want to comment on Christ in America. In case Rainbow Eagle's here, I hope he is. If he's not, sorry, but here's my comment. There are Native American traditions that could indicate Jesus Christ walked and talked among them. The Malay hypothesis in no way diminishes that possibility, since Jesus told the Book of Mormon people, "Other sheep I have."
which are not of this fold.
While I am fascinated by the Malay hypothesis, I am concerned that all the emphasis on the location for the Book of Mormon is a distraction from its message. After all, it is the message of the scripture that is important. Locating the Book of Mormon people in Malay does not change the message of the book. I would also add on, as far as I know, it changes no stories in the book. I am, however, sorry for any distraction the pointing of Malay hypothesis may have any distraction from the message. And then I've added my email to the bottom of this one for any of you. When you get the recording, you can see how to contact me. So now time for comments and questions, and I will add on in Zoom along the bottom of your screen, you see a row of icons, including one that is reactions. Click on reactions, you see a raise hand. Clicking raise hand will place you in the queue to take your turn. So I'm going to close that, and we're back now where I'm seeing gallery mode. Okay, Paul, you have the first shot at me.
All right. Well, thank you, David. Delightful presentation, and I really am proud of you. Pleased to have presentation adding such a unique perspective to our overall forum. But your conclusion raises a fundamental question that I'd like for you to be able to answer for us. I'm sure you can.
You
Really,
must say something, David.
you said the essential thing is the message of the book, and what is that?
I'm going to sidestep that question by simply saying each book in the Book of Mormon has a message. Read on and get the message for yourself. However, let me suggest you write this one down. The 5th chapter of Helaman, the 71st verse, is an intriguing verse that I think any of you should look at if you're thinking about the Book of Mormon message. But Book of Mormon message throughout is Jesus is the Christ, in simple words.
The Son of God.
Thanks, David. Brian, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, let me move. I'm going to move to another room where the household noise isn't so discernible.
Can we keep?
While we're waiting for Brian, Sally's wanting to know what chapter that was, David, that you mentioned.
Chapter 5, verse 71.
Me questions. I'm going to go off mute.
Thank you.
Book of Helaman.
Elam 571.
Okay, Brian, remember I'm the messenger.
Yes, yes, that was good. That was interesting. There are a lot of good, interesting evidence there. And I think
Still,
My-
much of what you think.
Excuse me, my wife will
Can
keep
y'all hear me?
interrupting here and I can't stop her totally, but go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned some thoughts, such as it's that there are, for example, the ancient Japanese people. I can't remember what they're called, the Shanto, or I can't remember. Anyway, they a lot of people think they're Book of Mormon extracts and that have come from the Americas. What you forwarded from Dr. Olsen, I think it is definitely some Israelite people. And it's even possible that they are, I'm open-minded, hey, if they find if the evidence eventually points that way, then hey, yeah, we'll go that way. The language situation, I when I first started this research 40 years ago, I did look at Polynesian languages and the Malay languages, and they don't have now in Malay. It seems in that area of the world there are a lot of different language families.
Yes.
Tagalog and those that are related to the Austronesian or Polynesian
Can you hold
languages
still?
don't have much. Don't really have a language connection. But like I said in my book, in fact, I think I'm going to run and get a copy and just read a couple of parts. Okay, I'll look sideways a bit. I think it's on, let's see. Yeah, page 16. I mentioned that, a lot of assumptions that early people in the church assumed from reading the Book of Mormon, that all Native Americans are Lamanites. 2, that the Jaredites were all killed off in the Jaredite destruction. 3, that the Polynesians are descended from Book of Mormon peoples during the era of Hagos cruises. But then they go to the universities, the youth go to the universities and find out 3 things: that the Americas were populated by Asian peoples across the Bering Strait, and that a lot of DNA evidence suggests that. 2, that the archaeological record reveals no Pan-American destruction at 600 BC. And 3, that the Austronesians and Polynesians came out of Southeast Asia, Malaysia. In fact, I think Malaysia is one of the Polynesian languages. And then later I say that
Hold still, David.
the fact of the matter is that, so that the youth think, well, these contradicting facts must mean that the Book of Mormon is not true. And yet the truth of the matter is that both sets are true to their varying degrees, but none exclusively so. And seeking, searching, and learning by study is how we unravel the complexities and clarify the ways and extents to which the truths apply and intertwine. In other words, both sets are true, but neither one is the whole truth. And so, yes, the Polynesians are Lehite extract with, a mixture of Lehite extract with the Malay, which did come out of Southeast Asia. There's no doubt about that. The language evidence is very strong and solid that Malaysian and all of the Polynesian languages are closely related. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily means that is where the whole Book of Mormon happened, but it's very possible that in those groups that went westward, that, hey, some hit Polynesian islands, some might have gotten to Malay, or it could possibly be another Israelite group that came from another direction. The Moroni city in Madagascar is really interesting. And the plates and the language stuff, a lot of alphabets came out of the Phoenician alphabet, which was the first one. And so Nibley's statements are interesting. I'm a big fan of Nibley, and he's not wrong very often. And so, his statements are interesting. Anyway, I found it all very interesting. And I definitely think some Israelite people are there, and that those findings represent a group of Israelites, whether it's the Book of Mormon Israelites or other Israelites, time will tell. And I'm open-minded just to let the evidence keep coming and see what we find. So I enjoyed the presentation. I thought it was very interesting and worth keeping in mind while we wait for more evidence.
Thank you. There's, again, the fact that the Israelite people have scattered throughout who knows where. But the fact
Well, they're in every land. Yeah.
the
Book of
Lord
Mormon
knows
and the
where
Bible
they
say that
are.
they're scattered all over the whole earth in every nation.
Yes, thank you.
What do
There's a
you say,
question in the
Israelite
chat
people?
from James wanting to know if anybody knows if Dr. Olsen, anybody has picked up the torch since his passing in 2014.
I didn't get the full question. Picked up the
But
what?
if anybody has picked up the torch to continue
the torch.
investigation. Yeah.
Well, on this forum, I have. Beyond that, I don't know of anyone. And in fact, Paul can comment on this, is he went exploring to get somebody to talk about the Malay hypothesis. He ended up with his big brother trying to solve the wasp nest.
Are you the big brother?
Yes.
And you did a wonderful job, David. Thank you. Earl
Thank you.
Watt has a question. Go ahead, Earl.
Yeah, David, I never heard this hypothesis before, but I'm very much intrigued, and I think you did an excellent job of presentation. I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think you made some comment in the beginning about DNA evidence. I didn't hear that in the presentation.
Yes, that was in the comment that was in the Amazon comment about his book. And there's nothing in the Sunstone article that mentioned DNA at all.
Okay.
So that's a wasp nest I didn't poke.
All right. Thank you very much.
Can you hold still?
Go ahead,
I guess
Monty.
if you're really interested, you might read his book and see if he said anything about DNA and in that. But that's something I think we need more current research on.
Dave, the one thing that kind of intrigued me was a lot of people would wonder how Joseph Smith came up with this work in New York, if it happened in Malaysia. How the guy got from Malaysia to New York to plant the stuff so Joseph Smith could find it.
Okay, well, the ocean currents are there to show that you can go from Malaysia to Madagascar, and from Madagascar around the Horn of Africa, and then to the Americas from there. And we've seen evidence previously that that is an entirely possible trip for someone to make. And let me comment, the fact that they were shipping smelted iron ore around to other civilizations indicates that they had sailing to a very high extent. And so for Moroni to sail to Madagascar with a group of people and set up his city there, and then from there to sail around the Horn of Africa to the Americas, to me is not an impossible task at all.
It just seemed odd, because if I wanted to hide a book, I wouldn't drive to New York to do it.
Well, yeah, why did the Lord put it in New York instead of someplace else? Because he knew where there were a bunch of idiot people who would follow up on it, I guess.
I enjoyed your
Hold legs
presentation.
still,
Thank you.
please. Hold your legs still.
I can't.
Why not?
Joy put a
Mhm.
comment
Hold
in,
your
David.
hands
She
still.
thanks you for a super interesting presentation. She saw a lot of the very details that people used to disprove the Book of Mormon, and here they are now as being shown as a real possibility. She thanks you for your presentation.
Thank you. I found the same thing myself. I've had some real doubts about the Book of Mormon because of all the conflicts I've found in trying to read the Book of Mormon and match it up where we said it had to be in America. And this has taken away those conflicts for me. I'm very willing to say, wait a minute, the Book of Mormon might be very, very accurate. And Joseph Smith's translation, as Ed Fonts indicated a couple of weeks ago, might be very, very accurate. I no longer have to say Joseph Smith mistranslated or added in to make some of the statements, like with silk and with swine.
Okay, Paul, go ahead, please.
I wanted to acknowledge Joy Vogel is in Mexico, and I very much appreciate her joining us for the forum tonight. And thank you for your question as well. But I did want to go back to the earlier question about DNA. I have the book in front of me, and Dr. Olsen put 181 points of highlight in his book, and point 83 says the lack of Lamanite DNA. In traditional Mesoamerica, all Amerindians were thought to be Lamanites. That's the introduction to the Book of Mormon. This is a frightful problem for the Mesoamericanists because little or no DNA support has been found. In Malay, the few Lamanites mingled genetically with indigenous Black people, and their DNA was effectively lost in the gene pool and may be completely undetectable. So that's the only, having read the book, that's the only reflection I recall in which he actually addresses the DNA issue.
That's your brother, Paul.
Yeah. So again, I'm at that point, boy, if we'd have 1/10 of the amount of energy that's spent on trying to prove the Malay, no, I'm sorry, the Central American is where the Book of Mormon came from. If we could have 1/10 of that energy spent on Malay, it'd be interesting to see where we ended up. That would include DNA.
Okay, go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, Paul or David, that was a great presentation. Thank you. And I do like the details that they talked about that explain some of the things that are not normally displayed in other areas. I'm just curious, in your exploration of it, is there anything that troubles you about it today that you haven't quite put your hand on?
The only point off the top of my head that troubles me a little bit is that the Karen people language-wise appear to have come from the north, not the south. But that's that's based on language. But if I went back to that slide, you'll see that the slide said Tibetan Burmese immigration, which would be more from the north and not from the south. And so that one's one that troubles me just a little bit. But again, additional research may prove who knows what.
Yeah, I hope somebody will take it up. I look forward to hearing some
They
more.
prove what, David? They prove what?
Thanks, Kurt. Wanda, go ahead, please. You're muted.
David, you did a great job. I'm
Thank
proud
you.
of you. And I taught in Malaysia for almost a month. And I took a tour of Malaysia before the class started because I got there. I was held up a week because of my brother-in-law's funeral. And when I got there on a Wednesday, they didn't want me to start teaching till Monday because Friday is always their day for prayer. So I took a bus tour with another person from AT&T. And I wish I had known this before I did that. But I did find that there have been many, during the Second World War, many different countries have owned parts of Malaysia.
Yes.
Wanda
So,
Stubbert.
but I was in Kuala Lumpur. And I brought back with me a piece of silk, a cloth that one of the people in my class had made and intending to make a dress from it. And that was in 1994. The dress hasn't been made yet. But it's a beautiful piece of work. So I did know that they were very proficient in silk.
Thank you. I deliberately added that section, or I was triggered by you, I guess, Wanda, the section on the Malay hypothesis in no way changes the story, the message or the
Exactly.
story of the Book of Mormon. The songs that you've written, the lessons that you put together, all those things you've done to teach about the Book of Mormon, I think they still work in Malay.
Yep, they would work anywhere, I suppose. So that was my comment. I'm
Thank you.
done.
Thanks, Wanda. Earl Watt is asking, David, what's the name of the book?
Name of the original book. Paul, you've got it right there in front of you. A More Promising Land of Promise for the Book of Mormon.
Okay, thank you. Rick, go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks, David. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, gotcha.
All right. In your beginning of your presentation, you said there was many choice lands.
Yes,
And the Book of Mormon uses the phrase choice above all lands.
See your brother?
And it says that 8 times in the Book of Ether, a choice land above all other lands. So I have a problem with there being Malay being the choice land above all other lands if you say that there are many choice lands. I would agree with Brian in that the house of Israel has been scattered around the world, and Jesus himself said he went to the other sheep. Another thing, did you want to comment about that?
no,
I
my
go?
wife is interrupting. I'm sorry, I apologize for her, but go
That's
ahead.
all right. So the above all phrase that I find in the Book of Mormon in Ether in 8 places, to me says there's only one choice land above all other lands. And that's where the Book of Mormon took place. Also, in the Book of Mormon, it speaks of a land of liberty that would happen upon this land. And the mother Gentiles would be at war with the colonists or with the Gentiles that escaped captivity. Does that description also fit Malay?
Okay, let me comment first of all on the choice land. When I was about 5 years old, my folks were desperate to get to a choice land. And they prayed about it, and mother had a dream. And in that dream, she was told to take her family and go to the choice land. And all that for them ended up being in a farm just west of Lamoni. For us, in our family, that has been ever since a choice land. So I interpret that choice land for those people, not for the whole world.
It's been home, right?
Okay.
And, you see your second comment, repeat it again, please.
The Book of Mormon land is described as being a land of liberty.
Yeah.
And that in the prophecy that Gentiles would escape captivity and their mother Gentiles would be at war with them.
Yes, I have a real problem with the whole term Gentiles because I take Gentiles to mean anybody who's not Israelite. That would include all of China, India, probably Russia, and lots of other countries in the world that are not the United States.
But within the book, yeah. But
So
within
land
the
of
Book of
freedom, fortunately, the land of freedom has been the United States, but that's only about 300 years. When you consider the world and the history of the world, I'm not sure that the United States is any better off that way than some other lands.
Yeah, but the Book of Mormon describes that the Holy Spirit would move upon a Gentile man and he would come across the waters, and other Gentiles would also come across the waters. So I think in the Book of Mormon description of Gentiles, it's referring to people that weren't Jews, you're correct. They weren't of the house of Israel, but they would be crossing the many waters in order to get to the Book of Mormon land.
Yes, I think that's true of that group of Gentiles,
Okay.
but I'm not, I'm not limiting that group to all the Gentiles.
So
I think,
what
I think if you
Yeah.
read the Book of Mormon again and think of Gentiles as anybody anywhere in the world who is not of Israelite heritage, you see it a little differently than if you read it thinking of America.
yes, but I think we're in our process of locating the Book of Mormon land event or event lands. We're trying to fit the Gentiles that came across the waters escaping captivity in history, as well as their mother Gentiles coming to war with them. Does that fit the Malay hypothesis?
I don't know enough about Malay history to know what it was like, assuming that the Jaredites, Nephites, etc., landed there. What was it like when they landed there? I have no idea.
So then you wouldn't know whether that the Gentiles were prophesied to inherit the land and scourge the Aboriginal people.
That's certainly been true of Malay.
And scourge.
And then,
If the
and then-
Quran are Israelites.
yeah, okay. And then my last one was asked already about how did Moroni get to place in New York? And your explanation was a long ocean voyage.
Yes,
Okay,
Can you?
but again, I pointed out that they, at that time, apparently were shipping smelted iron ore to other countries, which said ships at that time were much more advanced than we may have thought of.
David, would you hold still?
okay. Thanks, David. That was fascinating. I'm also
Good.
intrigued by the name of the city Moroni there in the Madagascar area. So
Now that's intriguing, isn't it? Now, whether
Um,
that's cause, whether there's cause and effect there, as Dr. Olson's kind of suggesting, or whether that's purely coincidence, well, we can
Yeah.
wrestle with that.
when I looked at it though, at the name of the town, it said it was named after land of rivers or something like that. I don't know if you went in and researched what Moroni means in that language.
No, I did not.
Okay. All right, thanks. I'll let someone else question.
David, Bill Gunlock here.
Yeah, Bill, can you, let's
Your
see,
wife is
I
trying
guess
to
Paul's
say,
the only one ahead of you, so I'll let you go ahead.
your wife is trying to say something. I'd like to know what she's trying to say.
She's trying to say things like, who is that person? What day is today? Sorry, we're at that point where I'm a 24/7 caregiver. And so I have her sitting here beside me because I really have no other choice right now.
That's okay. We love her dearly.
Thank you. We've been married in June, it'll be 60 years.
Wow.
It's been 60 good
Congratulations.
years, and I have no qualms at all about being a 24/7 caregiver. It's not the way I wanted to spend my life the last years necessarily, but I promised almost 60 years ago that whatever came, I would love her, and I still love her very much.
That's how my wife takes care of me.
That's awesome, David. Thank you. Paul, go ahead, please.
I wanted to go back to that, to my first question, and you answered it with citing fifth chapter of Helaman 71. And so let me read that, because I think that needs to be highlighted, because this is what you said was the fundamental message of the book. For behold, the resurrection of Christ redeemeth mankind, yea, even all mankind, and bringeth them back into the presence of the Lord. Wow.
Of the Lord.
Even all mankind, bringeth them back into the presence of the Lord. If God's purpose comes to pass, the immortality and life of man, then this is a beautiful, succinct means of saying that, and I think you nailed it.
Thank you. I'm much more in love with the book today after studying Dr. Olson's hypothesis than I was before I started it. The book being the Book of Mormon.
Scriptures.
I've always loved the book, but I'm even more in love with it today.
The scriptures.
Monty, go ahead.
Well, this is about a question that was back about 15 minutes ago regarding the
You can
genetic-
remember that far back, Monty?
Well, I kept my mouth shut, believe it or not, for once. But it had to do with the genetics of the situation and how the gene pool had become so diluted that these particular markers were no longer showing up. I was wondering how that can happen. I mean, even in a nation full of people, it doesn't seem like something as vast as a genetic code can disappear.
My training is in science, and well, I have a degree in engineering and a degree in earth science. I have nothing to
Well, I was
speak of in
directing more at the
biology,
person who brought that question up, I mean,
so I cannot respond to that question intelligently.
well, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot.
Nancy?
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have I'm not on a computer. I'm on a
Go
different
ahead,
kind of
Nancy.
setup.
You're
Yeah.
Good. You're good.
Okay. Back to the DNA thing. Was it Reed? Is that his name? That did the study on DNA?
David
Yeah.
Reed.
Yeah.
Is she Nancy?
Because I got his book,
David?
and I really think when did Olsen publish this?
Early 2000s. I
2006.
found several. I didn't find a
All right, so-
copyright date, but early 2000s.
Think of all of the things that have been discovered about DNA in 21 years or 22
Yes.
years now. I mean, it's like a whole new world. And it would be interesting. I'll go home now and get out his book and look and see what he says about that area. But anyway, it's something to look into. He may have some insights into that.
Yes,
I
and
was
note
just
also
wondering
that Dr. Olson was a chemist, not a biologist. And so
Oh, yeah.
he and I are not people to ask about DNA very much.
I was just wondering if he was basing it on strictly mitochondrial DNA or if he was looking at the whole picture.
Eddie Scarborough.
Well, like I said, it was 22 years ago.
Go ask him, Monty.
Okay.
No.
Okay, Earl, go ahead.
Yeah, I was the one who asked the question. My background is plant breeding genetics. And so that's why I was interested in the DNA. And I do my genealogy DNA. So it would be difficult for it to be completely obliterated, the genetics of a particular people. However, it could be pretty hard to find after so many generations. So I don't think that, but as far as the face of a Nephite is concerned, I think that's pretty sketchy DNA research that he's done and presented there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Nancy, go ahead. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, but I already forgot what it was.
Oh, okay.
Where are we?
Brian, go ahead.
I am unmuted now, am I?
Yes.
Yes. As far as DNA evidence is concerned, you've got, we don't even know for sure what we're looking for. I mean, the Jewish or Israelite DNA of 2,600 years ago, there are a few strands like the Cohen DNA. There are a few strands in the modern world that are identified as the Jews have, but even those have been diluted with so many other peoples that from what I understand, the microbiologists are not even sure what Jewish or Israelite DNA would have looked like 2,600 years ago, let alone trying to find it now. And there is some, like I mentioned earlier, there is some DNA in Uto-Aztecan besides a whole bunch of language evidence. The language evidence would suggest that the Americas is where it happened,
hold
but that
still,
does not
David?
exclude,
You hold still.
people during
Please.
Hago's time overshooting the Polynesian islands and getting to Malay and starting another civilization. He mentions it starting there at 300 AD and so forth. Hey, they could have been a group that got there and kind of kept it up and carried the name Moroni and so forth. And so I find it very interesting, but I'd have to stick with somewhere in the Americas for the biggest part, but because there is a good language evidence and some DNA evidence, but again, the DNA evidence is still being looked at and it's kind of in its infancy still. So, hey, again, time will tell.
I've been long intrigued by the Book of Mormon story of Hagoth, who sailed north and then came back and then sailed north again and disappeared. We sure want him to go some direction other than north. But that's what the Book of Mormon says. He went north. From the east coast of the Malaysian Peninsula, if you go north and then angle quickly east, yes, you could get out into the Pacific Ocean. But sailing north from America, okay, you work it out.
Yeah, I think it says they launched into the West Sea, sail northward, and it said something about shipping industry. I mean, it could have been that there were several successful voyages. In fact, that's what the Uto-Aztecan migrations would suggest. But yeah, I think what you have found and what you have relayed, like you say, you're just the messenger. What you relayed is interesting stuff, and it's definitely Israelite, and it's possibly Book of Mormon. So it's very interesting and worth thinking about, regardless of complications. I mean, the Hill Cumorah stuff, coming from Malaysia to Hill Cumorah is only a little bit further than going from Central America to New York. And so, it's only a slightly bigger problem. So we have lots of interesting problems to think about.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul was
would
first,
also-
Nancy, and then we'll go with Paul first and then you, Nancy, okay?
Let me add to that very quickly.
Okay.
Also intriguing is the narrow neck of land in Malaysia is east-west, not north-south.
No,
Paul?
I thought it was a pen.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm yielding to Nancy.
Oh, okay. Well, I finally remember what it was. Back to the DNA thing, and somebody said something about would it be diluted? Richard's son's mother-in-law has Neanderthal DNA. So I'm not so sure it would be diluted. It's down there somewhere because they even want to study her, but she's not really interested in it because she's one of the ones that does have Neanderthal DNA in her. And so I think that's fascinating. And she comes from Canada. So who knows how that happened. But that's another thought that about DNA, you just never know where it's going to end up.
Which you can see is another reason why I decided not to poke that wasp nest at all.
Definitely. Yes.
Well, I'm so pleased that I yielded to you because David had.
Paul, you're cutting out.
You're cutting out, Paul.
All right. Well, David has the Neanderthal DNA, and so do I.
Oh, okay.
You don't know that I have it. I've never been tested.
The fact that I've been tested and we are pretty closely related means that if you escaped it, it'd be well. And your mother referred to you as a
brothers. David.
No, I think that's exactly the point. I don't know much about DNA, but I think it's very possible for brothers to not have one to have the Neanderthal and the other one not, because we came from different parents, or came from the same parents, but we got our DNA in different ways from them.
well, but our dad had to hang below his knee.
Did he say?
Yes, Dad had 6 foot arm spread, 5'8" body, which, okay, you can say that was Neanderthal. I don't have that though.
All right. Well, you do have a large brain. And
Anyway, that's a wasp nest. I want you to leave alone.
okay. Well, I did want to highlight that we have had Simon Southerton, who presented the case for the DNA of Asia being the only real DNA evidence that we have in the Americans. And Simon Southerton ended up being ostracized because of his research. We have had also Rod Meldrum, who tried to make the case that the Northeast Coast Indians, the Iroquois and so on, had a bit of DNA tied back to Israel. And we also had David Reed, who supported that. So the answers may not all be final, but there's still good DNA research done. And it may be that there will be answers coming forth on that to help us out one of these days. At this stage, I think Brian Stubbs is right that the evidences are so small that it's well, we're talking about quite a number of generations that have allowed things to be mutated or muted, and we therefore have a long ways to go to get a more thorough understanding. But I appreciate the interest in the DNA, and if any of you have good DNA resources that ought to be brought in to share with us and give us more information, please let me know. And we'll get them on the roster for a presentation.
So if you want to get real speculative on that one, if Moroni and some of his people escaped the Lamanites as far as Madagascar and then sailed on to the Americas, okay, so you got some Israelite DNA coming in to the Americas.
Well, Boyd Tuttle, in his presentation on the Phoenicia, indicated that that the Amalekites probably came on Phoenician boat across the Mediterranean as you proposed, because that was the more efficient route to come to the Americas. And so of the 3 migrations the Book of Mormon tells us about, one of those probably was across the Mediterranean, and where it ended up is still a matter of question. Boyd Tuttle says it was at Montrose, Iowa. Frank Fry says that it was in the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico, in Mexico. The question is still open, but wow, what a fascinating body
Your
of
brother?
resources we have.
So my question back to you is, why did you limit it to 3 migrations? Israelites scattered far more than just in 3 migrations.
That's all the Book of Mormon is telling us about. No, I would recommend that that we have evidences of many other migrations, including Chinese, that have left their marks. And there's recent studies in Texas that are showing 23,000-year-old footprints in the sand, and they appear to be a family. So to have this earlier evidence of occupation, it goes well before the time of Christ, but I suspect that his message went to the people who preceded him as well as those that come after. Okay, another comment. Rena got a chuckle out of seeing her relatives show up there with the long ears.
Okay, well.
Tell them about it.
Is that any better than Carol having a bird landing on her head?
That's good. I need to hear.
And he asked about Carol with a bird on her head. But Rena's ancestors were of the long of Easter Island. That is one set of her ancestors. Go ahead, Bill.
talking to me?
Yeah, you wanted to speak?
Well, I just want to include some interesting DNA that all the what do you call them? The people of the Pacific Ocean Islands originally came from the Aborigines of Taiwan. And then the Taiwanese Aborigines came from Southeast Asia.
Joe Gunlock. Is that who that is?
Yes.
No, and Rita's DNA shows that. She thought she was Tahitian,
Yeah,
but,
I am.
wait, speak up, but tell her.
You gotta go before that.
According to what the DNA, test showed, that I was 44% from Southeast Asia,
That's right.
then 35% Polynesian, and then a whole bunch of other,
Stuff.
German, English, and Spanish.
And 1% American Indian.
Yeah.
So she's really a mix-up.
That's why we love her so much.
Were they talking about
Rena.
sister? Rena DeBarthe?
Yes. Well, I haven't heard a huge commitment from people to jump in there and do more research on Malaysia like I would dream could happen. Of course, we're all that generally at the years we're not going to do a lot of more research, but I would be greatly appreciated if we could do more research. It has occurred to me that as difficult as it's been for somebody to take a caravan of youth to visit Mormon lands, making it Malaysian making it Malay makes it a whole lot tougher.
Caravan of youth? Is that what you
Caravan of youth to visit Book of Mormon lands.
said? Young people?
Yes.
I hesitate to sing. I'd like to make sure you've all had to
No.
comment, and Bruce hasn't gotten a comment in there yet, so I think I got a call on him.
Oh.
Not chase him away? Okay.
No, he's still there. He just cut off his video, I think, along with his mute.
Oh, hey, the Joy Vogel's still there. We might get her to talk. I'm not sure if she still speaks English or not.
Oh.
Mm. And
Bruce, for some reason, we
We're
see
not
your lips
hearing you.
moving, but not hearing you. And you are unmuted, so we've got a different problem.
Ugh.
okay, raise a finger. Well,
Uh,
Oh, Rick's got his hand up. Go ahead, Rick.
All right. David, I have another question. When the Book of Mormon uses the phrase "this land," if the Book of Mormon was written in Malay and Malay is the Book of Mormon lands, then would that make them the lands of the Book of Mormon?
I would have to say yes. I don't know how else I could answer the question.
That's good.
You had a couple of ifs in there, and those ifs mean I have to say yes.
Right. Because in First Nephi 7:17, it says, after that our seed is scattered, the Lord will proceed to do a marvelous work among the Gentiles, which shall be great worth unto our seed. So
Marvelous
it
work, I
seems to
like
me
it.
that the Book of Mormon was describing the people where Joseph Smith found the book.
You'll have to translate that again for me because I don't follow.
Joseph Smith found the record of the Lamanites and the Nephites in the land that was this land. And he was told, we're told that the people that he's going to be reading about in the Book of Mormon are the people of that land, not of a
All
far
right,
distant.
wait. Where does it say that it was the people of America?
Doesn't use the word America.
Oh, let me make my position clear on this one. Joseph Smith found the plates in America and translated the plates in America.
Yes.
Therefore, the assumption is made that the people were in America. And from that assumption, then, the Native Americans had to be Lamanites. Those assumptions have been, starting with the Lamanites, you're backing out of those assumptions. And so I'm saying those are assumptions, not evidences. There is an assumption that because the book was found in the Americas, the people were in America. But I'm just saying that's an assumption.
First Nephi 3:177. Nevertheless, thou beholdest that the Gentiles which have gone forth out of captivity and have been lifted up above by the power of God above all other nations which are upon the face of the land, which is choice above all other lands, which is the land which the Lord God had covenanted with thy father that his seed should have for the land of their inheritance. Wherefore thou seest that the Lord God will not suffer that the Gentiles will just utterly destroy the mixture of thy seed, which is among thy brethren. So the book is written at the same place that the people are, in my understanding of those two passages.
I would accept that.
That he's not going to find a book that describes the people thousands of miles away across the ocean.
Why not?
The book was for the people where he found the book.
Okay.
And the Gentiles
I'll accept that as your interpretation.
And the Gentiles, which came across the ocean to escape captivity, were supposed to share the words of the book with those people that were scourged by them.
And remember the Quran tradition that the plates of gold or white plates, the holy book would be returned to them.
That's good. That's a legend.
Okay.
But Joseph Smith found the book in New York.
So?
After the Gentiles scourged the remnant of the seed.
But the Gentiles could be from China. Gentiles
No.
are all over the world. They're not just in America.
Right. But
And
where did the Gentiles land after they fled captivity? And where were the Gentiles when their mother Gentiles made war against them?
I think the Gentiles have been fleeing captivity and landing all over the world for centuries. And we have Americanized the Book of Mormon to the extent that it's become an American book. And I think that's very unfortunate.
Yeah, I don't, because I see America as the land of liberty, the home base of Christian missionaries, and the freedom to worship and believe in the Bible freely. And Malaysia is Islam.
True. Today.
Today, that's right, today.
So in this theory, then, we should all be going to Malaysia to teach those people their Christian ancestry.
All no, but the fact that we've ignored them is just as important on the other side. We should not be ignoring those people.
Well, the Book of Mormon says the Gentiles' task was to take the Book of Mormon message to the remnant of their seed.
Okay.
So
and if their seed as Israelites are scattered all over the world, other sheep I have, then to say it's just going to be in America is very Americanized, very self-proclaiming.
But you're not of this fold.
Okay, well, thanks for your presentation.
You're very welcome. And thanks for your challenge.
Well, I got more, but it'll have to be another time.
Can you hold still? Why not?
Can you hold still?
I need to poke in order to get them to respond to the zinger.
Hold
And-
your feet still.
Yeah, you've got to get a good question in. And Kurt, you're the only one out of your family that's done that so far today.
I'd like to make one more comment before we close. Let's see if I can get that back. Do I have the Malay? Do I have my?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Comments and questions.
Okay. I want to make this comment. As I see it, every word out of a prophet's mouth is, if every word out of the prophet's mouth is from God, then that individual is but a puppet with no agency. I do not believe God turns prophets into puppets. I think they retain their agency. I suspect every person here has at some point sensed the inspiration of the Holy Spirit and thus has, in a sense, become a prophet. However, that is not a 24/7, 365 days influence, but given for a specific time and situation. Even for someone who is frequently prophetic, their statements must be evaluated with respect to the situation. And then Corinthians, and the spirit of the prophets are subject to the prophets. So I strongly believe that Joseph Smith was prophetic as he translated the Book of Mormon. I don't remember the term that Ed Fonts used, but as he translated the Book of Mormon, I believe he was prophetic as he gave a section of the Doctrine and Covenants, but I don't believe that everything he said was anyway prophetic. And him believing that the Native Americans were Lamanites, I don't find any indication whatsoever that that was given as inspiration.
Amen.
All right. Oh, wow.
Kind of shakes one faith, right?
Yes, I grew up believing the Book of Mormon to be an American kind of thing. Dr. Olsen has shook my faith considerably. But then I believe very strongly in continuing revelation. So therefore, I must allow my faith to get shaken once in a while.
It's for all people.
Even prophets are
Even
people.
prophets, yeah. Even people who are once in a while prophetic.
Can you hear
that-
me now?
Yes, Bruce.
Oh,
Bruce.
okay, I
Bruce
figured it
Nelson.
out. Well, I'll just speak to that. Paul Edwards was one of my professors when I was at Graceland, and his dad, F. Henry, was a scholar in residence one year when I was there, and I got to talk with him quite a bit. And he was asked by the church to do another printing of his fundamentals book, and he said, I denied the permission because he said, I'm very proud of what I wrote in that book. But he said, I've moved on and so should the church. And he was always looking for new light. And I've actually met all of our prophets since Israel A, and I knew some of them well, except for Steve Veazey, who I have not met. But I certainly knew them as people, and I would definitely agree with David's sense that people still have their agency. And there was a phrase, the spirit of the prophets is subject to the prophets. And I think that's really true. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate Stephen as well, because I have I have experienced what I believe to be
It's
prophetic
raining outside, isn't it,
from quite a number,
David?
including those who are designated as prophets. But on occasion, for example, I was aware of my mother in prophetic utterance, and so to appreciate that that prophets are not always going to be prophets, but that all of us are called to be prophetic to some extent, I believe is a fundamental part of the restoration gospel. And I've dug into the history of Joseph Smith Jr. as an archaeologist. I find quite a number of mistakes that he made. And as far as I'm concerned, the bank in Kirtland was a mistake. As far as I'm concerned, cutting the 6x8 beam, the collar beam around the man, to be able to put a step in down into the hallway of Mansion House Hotel was a mistake. It weakened the Mansion House structure, and it was a mistake to build that hotel with 6 rooms that had no heat. To me, there's just quite a number of mistakes that I find that I have dug up. And so as I look at the overall picture, yes, I'm impressed that he was able to come up with what I think was fundamentally the special theory of relativity 70 years before Einstein published it. I'm impressed with his utterances about light and the nature of intelligence. So much of what he offered that I have found impressive. And the Book of Mormon, as David indicated, every book has material that I treasure. And so as I look at that, there are some I think that are far more prophetic than others, but all of us have something of that divine spark in us because we are created by God to be his children. And we have therefore within us the ability to tie into that divine principle and potentially give some expression to it. So yes, David, I very much appreciate your observation there. And I think that for people to recommend the idea of the inerrancy of the prophets is an error. And so because Joseph Smith specified Zarahemla as a name for Montrose, I think, well, it doesn't have to be a mistake. I think it's a mistake to presume that that's the same Zarahemla that burned in the Book of Mormon days and then was rebuilt, because I don't see evidence of either happening at Montrose.
Is Linda down there related to us?
Go ahead, Bill.
Is she related
Oh,
to us?
we have to realize that the RLDS it comes from a different culture than our Western brothers. That we have to vote on our prophets' talks. It implies that prophets can make mistakes.
Everybody can.
Well, the fact that we only accept as prophetic that which we as a people also accept as prophetic says that an awful lot of what Joseph Smith said we do not accept as prophetic. And on very humorous, to me, very humorous side of that, Joseph and Emma had a number of children, quite a significant number of children. Do you think that everything that Joseph ever said to Emma was prophetic?
Ever said what?
To Emma.
To Emma was prophetic. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Paul?
Go ahead.
It's 10 o'clock and I have to get up at 4:30 tomorrow morning. I gotta go to bed.
Good night, Bill.
I'm going to say good night to everybody. Bye-bye.
Night, Bill.
We'll get the fat lady to. No, it's gonna be me tonight. Good night, the Lord is watchful.
Over you.
Blessings go before you. Good night.
Bye.
We'll be praying for you. So good night.
Bye.
God bless.
God bless you.
Good night, everybody. All right.
Thank you all. Good night, Linda.
Thank